So I'm Bartosz Brzeziński from Bayer. I representing the crop science division, work and live in Poland. Today I have big pleasure to presenting you the utilization of the open source technology in one of the program run Bayer inside Bayer, focusing on the R&D program, mostly focusing on the corn and soybeans. So as you can see, we have a quick agenda. I would like to present this topic in accordance of the business process of I think in the most of the companies, the operating model. So we had the two key drivers here to launch this program. The first of all, we try to build a unified system, integrated in-house platform, which can unify the workflows across the Bayer. We operate mostly of each continent, and sometimes on each continent we have a slightly different workflow. So that's why that was one of the reason sits behind that change. And of course, next is want to understand the yield performance. I think everyone here know the importance of the spatial data, but from this perspective, in this holistic approach, we leverage a couple of very important geospatial layers to come up to actually discover new insights and see the benefits of use it. So on the screen, you can see that we consume the yield data. In a minute, I will show you the representation, how the yield data looks like in geospatial system, soil topography, weather, UAV/satellite images. Combination of those layers can tell us what is the yield performance, how we can better positioning our products, how we can finally and ultimately deliver our growers tailored recommendations. This is the regional footprint of the spatial trials right now. So first, we launched this program in North America. Later on, after the well adoption in North America continent, we move on and decided to also launch this in LATAM and Europe this year. Here we identify the cross-functional opportunities. As I said before, this program, the intention of this program was to build enough generic system that be used by other divisions, not only the R&D but also the market development and product supply. And finally, technology. I think that the most funnest part of this job. Before we move on to the tech stack, I quickly present the scope, the spatial scope of this program. So, as you can see on the right-hand side, this is a typical field in our program. So we have the red outlined boundary, which represent the site, and within that site we can have multiple sets, these green areas, and inside of them we have very narrow entries where actually the product, I mean the seeds, is planted. So you can imagine that most likely this model is utilized in different regions because this helps us to create the unified workflow. So this is how we operate across the globe. And now, before we actually start to process anything, we need to the first step in entire workflow is the grower's job, because they deliver us the planting and the yield data. So after the planting season is end and or harvest, the growers send the data to our system. This climate field view application is commercial application which our growers utilize in on daily basis, actually, during the planting, the harvest season. And actually, in the entire pipeline, this is the only part that is not open source. Later on, during the night, nightly automated synchronization data flowing into the biocrop science system. Yeah, once we receive the data, we start the processing. This is the general overlook how the workflow looks like, but in a minute I will second the more detailed version of it. Yeah, and finally the tech stack of this entire pipeline. As you can see in the middle of it, we have the GeoServer, PostgreSQL, and this is the core of this tech stack. I here we except the AWS cloud service on everything rest is open source. So GeoServer is a core. This help us to serve and deliver the data to the users via the WFS, WMTS, and so on, all the services. But maybe starting from the left, from the beginning, we have the raw harvest data, we have the raw as planted data, and those data need to flow through that climate field view application, and later on, our consumers can pick it up and send to our system. And at the very beginning, the PostgreSQL is the very important part because all the data sits there. So right now, in case of the planting data, the table is around maybe 1 terabyte. It's partitioned, multiply indexed, and we use a couple of attributes to create a multi index to better use the data. I don't want to go through that all the workflow, but I just want to emphasize that GeoServer for this case is quite enough. But in entire organization, every day we received around 70 million calls to GeoServer, and that's why we decided to move couple of the services to native GeoServer. Yeah, and here you can see the few examples of raw as planted and yield data. On the left-hand side, you can see the very small as planted polygons, which represent the cassette of the planter. So each of the planter can be six cassette. It depends, but in this example, we see the six small polygons in the row, and each of these row have a bunch of the attributes that are utilized by our pipeline. So, for example, the yield monitor, which collect the data, can have information about how many seed was dropped on the field, what was the heading of the planter, what was the speed, and so on. On the right, we have the yield data. Those polygons are slightly bigger, and the geometry of this yield data represent the combined header. So when the header is operating, the data, the seed actually is coming through that header later on through the yield monitor where the data are collected and measured. For example, like moisture and what was the mass, and also what was the heading, what was the speed, and so on. Couple of example of derived layers. So as you could see before, those small polygons are later on aggregated to actually show us what was the planter or combine pass. So here actually we see the passes created on top of the as planted data. So this image in the middle represent the planter pass. And later on, we need to break it down, dissolve the data, and create the smaller plots. This process actually is, without the having context, it's hard to explain this complexity of this process because those as planted passes in combination with what actually was set up before the planting season by the growers can give us this data. I'm referring to this right-hand side image. Yeah, and before we start to aggregate anything, we need to also, the next step is to break it down and create the small grids. And the reason staying behind that is that sometimes yield monitor doesn't give us enough the yield data. Sometimes we can have the only 2 yield points inside of each plot cell, and that's why we decided to create the standardized grids to actually have this possibility to later on compare the yield data within each of the plot cells. And this is related to the yield equipment configuration. Sometimes we use the 5 hertz and sometimes 1 hertz monitor system. So actually, this help us collect the data, and this is response for the GPS. And finally, this is the last step where the users can see the results of the data. As you may remember from this workflow, important thing was that actually I haven't described it, but the important part of this entire workflow is to validate the data, to eliminate some noise from the data. Like, if, for example, if the combine was running too slow, we need to eliminate this data because this actually doesn't represent anything. This might be related with some damages, some phenomena happening during the harvest or planting. So we need to validate the speed, moisture. If, for example, corn is too wet, we cannot actually do anything with that, and this data is useless to compare something later on by the analysts. Yeah, from GIS perspective, this process is really simple because we have yield points, as you can see on this left-hand side example, and those points with calculated yield at the record level are later on aggregated to those plot cells 11, and this is the result of entire pipeline. Here you can see the small reddish boundary, which represent the exclusion zone. So if something happened during the harvest, or for example, uh, the portion of the yield was damaged by the animals, or we had flood, or something else related to the weather, and the users can create the exclusion zone, and that part won't be processed in this pipeline. Finally, we have other couple of applications created in our ecosystem, and this upper image represents the aggregation view, where the users can trigger the aggregation for each of those sets. And this bottom image represents the application called data queue, where finally the data coming in and are used by the growers or by the data scientists together with other data, because what we deliver is actually the part of it, but having this only the information what was the yield, actually we cannot conclude with anything else, just having the information what was the yield. So we couldn't we would be able to make some conclusions. Here few dashboards created for the users. Uh, users sometimes need to know if their data are already in our system. That's why we had to create a few dashboards for them to give this and provide this information. This is internal platform, but also created in open source. So as a front end, we use the React application, and we simply use the APIs built for different purposes. And yeah, this is the next example. Actually, here you can see the representation where the fields included in the program are located. And finally, outcomes. So We build that application to deliver the geospatial data insights. Uh, we and we also simplify the data capture to single universal pipeline. And one of the last outcome that this allow us to get rid of the some regional vendors, because we actually created everything in house as an internal platform. The current project value with funding through the 2025 help us to, of course, optimize the costs. This is the next, of course, obvious factor for this kind of workflows. Yeah, thank you for coming and listening.